On this Monday night, Russian forces hit a safe haven, the deadly barrage raining down on Lviv. And fears Russia has captured Canadians, plus new video of Putin's prized warship sinking. Keeping the faith.
There was a time in which being religious has certain social benefits.
Why more Canadians are losing their religion. Hope floats for a stuck container ship.
This vessel had basically plowed itself fully aground.
The Ever Forward finally living up to its name again, and unbearably funny.
It's WrestleMania.
The wild spectacle brewing in the backyard.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Chris Galis.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Tonight, the human toll is growing as Russia intensifies air attacks in the territory it seeks to control. And a warning, some of the images in our coverage you might find hard to watch. Russia is now targeting cities further west, like Lviv, that have until now largely escaped the death and destruction witnessed elsewhere, like mass graves found further east along the front lines of this war. Ukraine is also accusing Russia of carpet bombing Mariupol, an attempt to crush that city's fighting spirit. And late today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed Russian forces have begun a new offensive in the Donbass region. Redmond Shannon has our top story tonight.
Ukraine's western city of Lviv has been a relative safe haven during almost 2 months of fighting. Until now, Russian missiles killing at least 7 people, local authorities say. The deadly advance of Russia's war extending to a city that's become a refuge for thousands fleeing. It's also a major supply hub. This building was once a tire shop. Warehouses hit too. Russia claims they were military targets. According to this video published by the mayor of Lviv, one of the injured was a 3-year-old boy who lost part of a finger. More attacks and deaths in the city of Kharkiv too, Russia boasting it hit 315 military targets across Ukraine. These victims appeared to be civilians. Where are we supposed to evacuate to now, says this woman. They are hitting all of Ukraine. An increasing feeling that nowhere is truly safe. Many of those who remain in Ukraine are preparing for a major escalation from Russian forces.
During the last 2-3 days, it were every day 1 or 2 rockets flying to Kramatorsk.
I think the Russians are targeting military hardware depots, factories, and trying to erode and reduce the capability of the Ukrainian armed forces to resist their strike when it comes in the east.
The remaining Ukrainian forces holed up at that steel plant in Mariupol vow to drain Russian resources as long as they can. In Moscow Monday, Russian President Vladimir Putin called the international sanctions an economic blitzkrieg that has backfired by increasing inflation in the West. Meanwhile, his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky submitted more documents to the European Union as part of the long process to join the bloc, saying that his people's souls and minds are already part of Europe anyway. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Russia's new offensive could effectively landlock Ukraine. Tonight, the area Russian forces control has grown significantly as fighting rages in strategic cities across southern and eastern Ukraine, including Mykolaiv and Mariupol. Moscow claims to be in full control of the port city, except for one small pocket around the Azovstal steelworks, where Ukrainian soldiers from the Azov battalion are still holding out but are completely surrounded. As Abigail Bimman explains, there are reports Canadians are also there, holed up inside.
Explosions, thunder, and smoke rises from the Azovstal steel plant, one of the biggest metallurgical plants in Europe. A warren of buildings and tunnels where Ukrainian forces are holed up as Russia tries to take full control of Mariupol. Russia's defense ministry says, according to Ukrainians who surrendered, there are up to 400 foreign fighters inside, including Canadians. That has not been verified, but analysts say it's plausible.
We've seen pretty clear evidence that Canadians in sizable numbers have taken steps to join the fight in Ukraine. The Ukrainian government has gone out of its way to make that easier.
Canada has advised against all travel to Ukraine. Russia has labeled those foreign fighters mercenaries, meaning they would not be entitled to the protections of the Geneva Convention if captured.
It is scary because the mercenary line would give Russia some ability to do things to those people, those presumed Canadians, that they wouldn't be able to do to normal POWs.
Walter Dorn disputes Russia's position, saying Canadians fighting are under the command and control of Ukraine, and says if there are Canadians captured in Azovstal, they may become bargaining chips in some kind of prisoner swap, similar to these two British POWs.
Obviously, I'd really appreciate your help in this matter.
They appeared on Russian state TV Monday, captured in Mariupol, asking Boris Johnson to exchange them for an ally of Putin with a similar plea. It's not clear whether any of the men were speaking freely. It's also unclear how many civilians may be inside the steel plant. This video, shared on a Twitter account called Canadian-Ukrainian Volunteer, claims that Alice is inside the plant, her mom an army medic tending the wounded. Neither Global Affairs Canada nor the Foreign Affairs Minister's office would confirm whether any Canadians are in Azovstal, saying they don't have a record of Canadians who choose to travel. But the department did tell Global News they haven't had any calls for help from any Canadians inside the plant, noting they may not be able to help Canadians who are injured or captured by Russian forces. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
We're getting our first glimpse of Russia's flagship missile carrier just moments before it sank. A short video and images yet to be verified independently have been posted online and reportedly show the Russian destroyer Moskva billowing smoke and listing. Russia claims the ship capsized during a storm after a fire broke out on board, but Ukraine insists it struck the Moskva in a missile attack. In less than a week, French voters will cast their ballots in a key election that could have major implications for how the West handles Russia. France's incumbent leader, Emmanuel Macron, is in a tight race against far-right politician Marine Le Pen. Macron has been a major player in trying to de-escalate the conflict in Ukraine, while Le Pen is seen by many as an ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Eric Sorensen reports.
The race for the presidency of France is too close for comfort for Emmanuel Macron and for many in the West who fear what will happen if he loses.
Avec Madame Le Pen, fini.
With Marine Le Pen, it's finished, says Macron, when it comes to foreign investment.
Cette élection est aussi un référendum sur l'Europe.
But it's also, he says, a referendum on Europe and whether France will turn hard right. Macron has used the world stage to bolster France's support for NATO and for weeks has tried to persuade Russia's Vladimir Putin to stop the war in Ukraine. Marine Le Pen, the far-right candidate, has made it clear she would weaken ties to the European Union and to NATO and forge closer links to Russia. She favors what she calls a rapprochement between NATO and Russia.
No one would be happier than Putin with a Le Pen victory of the French presidency. So it would be very, very serious for the NATO and Western support for Ukraine.
Le Pen has toned down her established views on race in this campaign, appealing to voters on issues like the cost of living. I have the people behind me, she says. The first vote a week ago gave a narrow win to Macron over Le Pen, but together they won just half the votes. Left-wing candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon finished a close third. But where will his and other votes go now?
Il ne faut pas donner une seule voix à Madame Le Pen.
Mélenchon told his voters not a single vote to Marine Le Pen.
Il ne faut pas donner une seule voix à Madame Le Pen.
But he did not endorse Macron, and many voters simply want change. I'm against everything the president stands for. He's a bully, she says. But would you rather a woman financed by Vladimir Putin, says a young man? The first time they squared off in 2017, Macron earned 2/3 of all votes against Le Pen. But this time looks closer. One projection puts Macron's margin at 54 to 46 ahead of this week's election.
She's benefiting from classic support for populism.
But populism might not be enough this year when war is on Europe's doorstep.
Emmanuel Macron has benefited really from the rally around the flag effect because of the Ukraine war.
In the end, Macron may prevail not because voters are eager to re-elect him, but may want to stop Le Pen. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
As Canadians wrap up the Easter long weekend and recognize other religious events, new data suggests religion is becoming less important to people. A new Angus Reid poll shows 18% of Canadians identify as religiously committed. Faith is strongest across the prairies, while Quebecers are now the least religious. As Mike Rollet reports, the survey shows many Canadians now believe that some religions are more damaging than beneficial to society.
Religious services aren't as crowded as they were a few decades ago. While religion still plays a large role in many Canadian households and wider society, its overall influence is waning.
I think just in general, we are becoming a more secularized country. So much of it has to do as well with the way we're raised. It has to do with generational change.
A new survey conducted by Angus Reid in partnership with the Christian think tank Cardis found that while 19% of Canadians now consider themselves non-believers, more Canadians than ever identify as spiritually uncertain.
And I think that speaks to, the social benefit or the social respectability of religion. There was a time in which being religious had certain social benefits. If you were applying for a job, there was an assumption that that was a merit, that was a good thing. Those things aren't as real anymore.
But it's more than that. Just over a third of Canadians now say they pray once or twice a month, while almost as many say they feel the good of religion in society outweighs the bad.
The broader society still is not fully comfortable and fully clear about what to do with religion, and therefore they show some signs of discomfort, at least. Maybe it's not intolerance at the moment, it is discomfort.
Hinduism, Sikhism, and Judaism are widely seen in a positive light.
Father God, I just thank you.
But the respondents to this survey don't share the same views about evangelical Christianity and Islam, and to a lesser extent, Catholicism, which a small majority of participants here said they consider to be more damaging than beneficial to society. Rick Heemstra of the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada believes that's in small part because of how they're portrayed in American media.
I watch Netflix just like everybody else, and really when you see the perceptions of evangelicals or Christians or religious people, generally, let's just say devout religious people, they are usually presented as deviants.
And perhaps it is matters of perception that are pushing Canadians to both sides of the spiritual spectrum, leaving a growing middle that largely avoids traditional religious labels. Mike Drolite, Global News, Toronto.
And you can read about how immigration is sustaining religion in Canada on our website, globalnews.ca/globalnational. Nova Scotians are marking the second anniversary of one of Canada's worst mass shootings by remembering the 22 people who died. Bagpipes and quiet moments of reflection marked 2 years since a gunman, disguised as an RCMP officer, went on a killing spree over 13 hours across the province. Flags were lowered across Nova Scotia today. The province is planning to designate April 18th and 19th as official days of remembrance starting next year. And it was a deadly Easter weekend across the U.S. after 3 mass shootings there. 2 teenagers died and several others were injured at a house party in Pittsburgh yesterday. Police say as many as 50 rounds were fired inside the Airbnb rental property. Investigators believe multiple shooters were involved. And in South Carolina, 2 major shootings at a nightclub and a mall left more than 18 people injured. The push to better protect teenagers from violence. Coming up, the recent tragedies and who's most vulnerable. Students at an Edmonton high school are mourning the tragic death of one of their peers. Karanvir Sahota died Friday after being stabbed earlier this month. It's the 4th death in 6 months involving Canadian students being attacked at or near their schools. And as Heather Yoricks-West explains, advocates are pushing for action.
A memorial is growing outside Edmonton's McNally High School as the community grieves the loss of a friend and peer.
Our hearts are certainly with them, with our McNally school community, with our students, our staff, and everyone impacted by what is really the unimaginable.
In the last 6 months alone, there have been several violent incidents at or near Canadian schools. Last November, 15-year-old Mahir Dasani was fatally stabbed in Toronto. 4 months later, 18-year-old Jaheem Robinson was shot and killed at school in what police say was a targeted attack. Lucas Godet, 16 and in grade 10, was fatally stabbed in Montreal in February too. And there was a second Montreal teen stabbed outside their school this month. The victim there survived. But 16-year-old Karanveer Sahota wasn't so lucky. He died Friday, days after being stabbed outside his Edmonton high school.
Clearly, there's a lot of issues going on, and we're not addressing them.
The executive director of Youth Mental Health Canada says the pandemic has made problems of mental health, youth suicide, and youth violence more severe, and not enough is being done to support kids.
We don't respond with immediacy or efficacy when young people are in crisis, in a health crisis. We put people on a wait list.
Statistics show young racialized men are particularly vulnerable.
We really need to be attending to the way kids get along with each other. Bullying rates are really high in Canada. They're among the highest of economically advanced countries in the world.
Canada's research chair on school-based violence prevention says schools are still not doing enough to tackle the country's bullying problem. After 2 years of collective trauma, the need for social and emotional developmental support is perhaps needed more now than ever before. Heather Urix-West, Global News, Calgary.
Shanghai confirms its first deaths linked to China's biggest COVID outbreak since the virus was first discovered. All 3 people were elderly and had underlying health conditions and were not vaccinated. Shanghai, China's financial hub, is now entering another round of mass testing to help curb the spread. Most of the city's 25 million residents are also being confined to their homes for a third straight week, despite the easing of other public health measures. Still ahead, violent clashes in Sweden. What sparked the chaotic demonstrations? Next. At least 40 people have been injured in riots that spread throughout Sweden over the Easter weekend. Protesters are angry a Danish far-right politician with Swedish roots burned a Quran during a tour of the country. 20 police vehicles have been damaged or destroyed and more than 24 people arrested. Police are calling the riots extremely serious crimes against society, and they believe some protesters might have links to criminal gangs that target police internationally. Israeli troops shot and wounded 2 Palestinians in violent clashes that erupted during an arrest raid in the occupied West Bank. The Israeli military says 11 Palestinians were arrested during the overnight raids following days of unrest at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Tensions are high after the first weekend of Ramadan and Passover saw dozens of Palestinians injured after they hurled stones and fireworks at police officers who fired back with rubber bullets and stun grenades. Up next, the Ever Forward floats again. What it took to get this mammoth container ship unstuck from the mud. The race is on to prevent an environmental disaster off the coast of Tunisia after a tanker carrying 750 metric tons of diesel fuel sank. The ship was heading from Egypt to Malta when it hit bad weather and sank on Saturday. No leaks have been detected so far, and all 7 crew members were rescued. A protective boom has been placed around the site to help contain any fuel slick, and Italy says it's sending a Navy vessel specializing in marine disasters to help out. An oversized rescue mission has successfully ended on the east coast of the U.S., where a massive cargo ship ran aground about 5 weeks ago. Contrary to its name, the Ever Forward wasn't going anywhere. It had been stuck in the mud until it was finally freed on the weekend. But as Jackson Prosco reports, the saga doesn't end there.
The Ever Forward is once again moving forward. No small feat for a ship that spent more than a month stuck in deep trouble.
So just how stuck was the ship?
The ship was stuck. This vessel had basically plowed itself fully aground, and it went about a ship length and a half out of the channel.
As problems go, this was a big one. A cargo ship the length of 3 football fields, weighing more than the CN Tower, wedged in the muddy bottom of the Chesapeake Bay.
If you've ever been in a marsh and you've stepped in the marsh with your boot and then you try to pull it out and your foot comes out but not the boot, kind of the same thing on a grander scale.
It all started in March when the Ever Forward missed a turn and ran aground in shallow water. For 36 days she was beached. They tried pushing and pulling with tugboats. They tried dredging around the hull. It started to feel like the Ever Forward might be stuck forever. It's not unlike what happened to the Ever Given, a sister ship of the Ever Forward that became wedged in the Suez Canal last year. It took 6 days and a lot of digging to set her free. Weeks after getting stuck, the Ever Forward needed some forward thinking. Crews made the risky decision to remove about 500 of her 5,000 containers at sea to lighten the load. High hopes and high tide set the boat back afloat.
They have to survey the vessel to determine the amount of damage done to it. It's been sitting on the bottom for 5 weeks.
Even if the vessel is found to be in ship shape, the fate of her containers is now about as clear as the mud she was stuck in. Maritime law allows the shipping company to charge its customers for some of the cost of saving the vessel. The Ever Forward may be free. Her cargo could stay stuck in the courts for months. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
And that is Global National for this Monday night. I'm Chris Galis, and we'll leave you tonight with some wildlife wrestling.
Now they're both in there. It's WrestleMania.
Young black bears emerged from hibernation to duke it out in a BC backyard trampoline. Luckily for the owners, it remained undamaged once the 2 animals bounced off, probably to continue their cage match somewhere else. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks very much for watching. Donna Friesen will be back with you tomorrow. Hope you have a great evening.